There are several things that have to happen after the Mets' pitiful series loss to the Minnesota Twins. Several things have to change because that loss was beyond embarrassing. Pretty much after the first game, offense non-existent. There were a few moments where the Mets had decent offense, but for the most part it was bad. Now, I can't show you what happened or memorize everyone's statistics during the game because I am currently in New Orleans, but the offense was a big problem. The defense in the second game made errors that allowed the Twins to score unearned runs. Obviously, it was 2 unearned runs and the Twins still won 6-3. But you could tell how the Mets would maybe change their strategy a little bit if it was a more attainable game. You could maybe tell how that would be the case. Pitching has also got to improve, although I'll be the most lenient on pitching in part because the Mets right now are incredibly injured. They had to throw out Brazoban as a starter and just put together a bullpen game. Negman actually pitched pretty well, but then Budo did not. Granted, there's this whole thing about the umpires, which obviously is out of Mets' control, but I will criticize Mendoza in a little bit. My biggest criticisms of this game is a few key players that I think deserve the burden of the blame. First of all, you have to blame Jesse Winker and the third base coach for the aggressive base running. Many say that Winker should have been called safe at the plate and not out, but when you look at the MLB rules, if you take your hand off the plate and then the catcher tags you because you're sliding into the plate, that's still an out. So Winker has to be smarter there, and he should have never been sent in the first place. Why would you send a runner to the plate when you would otherwise have first and third with no outs? That's the rule of thumb. Never make the first or second out at home plate, seeing as a sacrifice fly can always bring a runner from third home. And, and the Mets wound up not scoring that inning after the leadoff double. Also, even though Winker did hit an RBI in the 8th inning to continue the Mets rally, he then grounded into a double play in the top of the 10th. And when the Mets were starting to look like they could maybe propose a scoring threat, they wound up not being able to. So they deserve a lot of blame for that. Who else deserves a lot of blame for the series? Juan Soto. Now look, I get it. Soto homered twice in the series and he'd only had one homer all year. But Soto is a huge reason why the Mets lost that game. He was 0 for 5 with 3 strikeouts in the third game against the Twins, the rubber match. And he had bases loaded and 1 out and grounded into a double play on the first pitch. Nimmo and Winker also had major bad plays when he swung at the first pitch. Why are we swinging at the first pitch when the first pitch is not good? So Soto deserves a lot of blame for that. Unfortunately, there's not really a lot the Mets can do about it because they included a no-trade clause in his contract. So Soto can't be traded, but he's becoming a real problem. And again, there's nothing you can really do about it. Whereas Lindor, you actually have a year where if you want to trade him, might as well trade him because he is not batting well. And he made that big error that led to 2 unearned runs against the Twins on a missed fielding play. And he seems to be making errors left, right, and center. In no way should Lindor be the Mets captain when he can't even make routine plays. Brandon Nimmo's plate approach has to change. He's swinging for the fences only, and when you're not a home run hitter, you can't be swinging for the fences like that. So that's a huge problem that I have with him. There's a huge problem that I have with him. And Pitching, I didn't think it was terrible. I thought Mendoza's bullpen management was a little strange. Kranick has certainly regressed. But pitching I didn't think was too bad relative to the situation. And I think that if the Mets learn to wake up and score runs, then these pitchers wouldn't need to go complete shutout. As for the umps, of course the umps were really bad. The batter was egregiously out at first base, and the umps, there's no excuse for that. The umps should be held accountable. That being said, the reason why the Mets couldn't challenge that play was because they had already burned their challenge on a leadoff double, either in the 6th or in the 5th. I think in the 5th. So the inning, not sure if it was that same inning or the inning prior to it. But either way, that should have been the third out. But if the Mets had their challenge, they would have challenged it and it would have immediately been overturned. Instead, they challenged it on a play that was never going to get overturned, since, you know, if it's inconclusive, the call on the field stands. And they clearly would have needed that challenge later. So that was another baffling decision by Carlos Mendoza. Ultimately, the Mets sit at 11-7, and while they are atop the NL East, they are not in a good position because they are not really in line to make a wild card spot if they lose the NL East. And the Phillies are 10-8, so they're right behind the Mets. The Mets have no sort of cushion whatsoever. I guess only time will tell if the Mets can hold on, but you lost back-to-back games in a series to a crap team like the Twins. The Mets, though, except for the Blue Jays, have not really played a real team yet. The one time they did play, you know, a true championship contender in the Astros, they lost that series. Maybe the Marlins will surprise a lot of people, but either way, I just think the Mets are playing like absolute crap right now, and they seem to have no way of fixing it. Also, one other player we have to blame, Tyrone Taylor, badly misplayed a batted ball in extras. If he had not misplayed that ball and instead was able to either catch it or even just play it on a bounce, if he was able to play it on a bounce, it would have either been an out at the plate or more likely 1st and 3rd with no out. Obviously, when you don't score on the top of extras, your chances of winning the game are like 20%. In 1st and 3rd, then with no out, your chances of winning the game are like 8%. But I'd rather be 8% than be 0%. And Tyrone Taylor could not field that ball, thus losing the game for the Mets.